Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and I love making bread and I hope you do too. And if you've never made a sourdough bread, I'm going to show you today how to make the sourdough starter from the beginning until we're getting ready to start using the sourdough starter itself to make our bread. And then I'll show you at the end how we're going to keep the sourdough keep going, because you can keep the sourdough for weeks, years, and I've even heard of people having it with decades. So definitely you can keep it going, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So what we want to do is, if you've got rye flour, dark rye flour, you can definitely use that. That works the best. I couldn't find any dark rye flour to show you the example for it, but I do have whole wheat flour. You can definitely use either one of those two. The rye flour will work a little bit better, but you will get the same results at the end for the whole wheat flour that you get out of that. If all you have is all-purpose flour, you want to make sure that your all-purpose flour is unbleached. You do not want to use bleached flour. It will not work in this process. And then the other part of it is we're going to be using water. And so I've got filtered water, and you definitely want filtered water, and water either at room temperature or just a little bit warmer. It's just like if you're using the regular yeast that you get in the packages. If it gets too warm or too hot, it will kill it. So we definitely don't want to kill our starter right off the get-go. So definitely, if you've got water, make sure it's just either at room temperature or a little bit warmer. And we want filtered and dechlorinated water. I've always used dechlorinated water in my starter, so definitely you want that. So if you don't have the dechlorinated water, what you can do is get the filtered water. I just took it right out of the refrigerator, and then you can let it sit for 24 hours, and that will bring the water up to where it is dechlorinated with that. Or you can buy filtered water in the store and it won't have any of the chlorine in it. So definitely do it either way. You can either set your water out, and I've got a quart of water set out, and I've got half of it in here just so that I can show you the example of what we're going to be doing today. But you want to keep that quart out, and that way you've got it for the whole time, because this process, once we get started on it, you'll need to sit with it for about 7 to 10 days. Typically it'll activate within 7 days and you've got your starter ready to go. The first 2 or 3 days you might not see any movement on it at all. Don't get discouraged, it will happen. So definitely I'm going to show you how that works like that. So I know that's a commitment for 7 days to get this started. So make it easy on yourself. If you want to do it in the morning, if you've got free time in the morning, definitely you can do it then, because what you want to do is you want to do the feedings that you'll be doing on it daily at 24-hour mark. So if it works out better for you to do it in the morning, then set the schedule for it to start in the morning. If it works better for it in the evening, whatever works for you is what makes it easier so that you can get your starter going. And once you get it going, you can put it in the refrigerator and it can sit in there for a couple of weeks, and then you can go back in there and give it another little feeding until you get ready to use it. But if you like bread as much as I do and you like sourdough, I know once you get it going, you'll be making sourdough bread quite frequently. So what you want to do is, if you don't have a kitchen scale, I would recommend getting one, and one that you can measure grams in, because that's going to give you the most accurate measurement that you can possibly get. I'll put the link in the description box below of the ingredients of the days when it goes through. That way you can capture it, and that way you can follow along with it as you go. As you're looking at containers to put your starter in, definitely pick something at least a quart out of it, or at least 1,000 milliliters in it. This one that I've got here is a WEC container, and this is a 750 milliliter container. So if you've got one that's a quart or pretty close to a quart or 1,000 milliliters, that's definitely what you want to try to shoot for. And that way you won't have your starter coming over the sides in it, because it is going to rise up in the container and go back down in it. So definitely something that's going to be big enough that you'll be able to put that in, and you want something that you can put a lid on it or some type of fitting on the top of it. So with the WEC jars here, I'm just going to put that on the top just like that when I'm done with it. So if you don't have a WEC jar, you can definitely use a quart mason jar. You can use one of those. And if you use that, just use the lid on it. Do not use the ring, because what's going to happen is once we start the process to making our starter, it's going to be releasing gases. And what that's going to do is the gases are going to escape, and you don't want anything on it where it's going to tighten it down on it to keep that pressure in there, because it could damage the container that it's in, and it actually could break. So you definitely don't want that to happen. So whatever you use, just make sure that whatever you're using, just put it on there without the tightening it down on it. If you don't have any lids for your quart jars, you can definitely use a coffee filter. And with the coffee filter, just get your rubber band, one of these big ones. A lot of the produce and things in the stores come with those. And you can put the coffee filter on the top, and that way you can keep anything out of your starter that way also. All right, so now that we've talked about our flour and our containers and our water, let's get our scale over here. And again, I'm going to put that in grams. That's going to give you the most accurate measurement that we've got. And we're going to take a measurement of our container and we're going to write that down. So my container is 396 grams. So I'm going to zero that back down to 0. And that number is going to come important as we continue this process. So now I'm just going to take a spoon here and I'm going to measure out 100 grams of my flour into my container. All right, as you can see here on my scales, I've got 100 grams of my flour in here now, and I'm going to zero that back down. And now I'm going to put in 150 grams of my water. All right, now that I've got 150 grams of my water in there, I'm just going to take a spatula and I'm going to go in and give that a stir and mix through. All right, now that I've got my flour and my water mixed together, I did push it down on the sides here. That way I can see it and show you what it's going to do as it continues on through its process. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. What we're looking for now is any movement at all on the side. So as the fermentation starts with our flour and our water and the reaction with the microbes that's in the flour and what we're going to get out of the air, it'll start reacting and it'll start coming up on the side. That's why when you started your starter, you want to make sure that you've got a container big enough that it will come up and down and rise through it. So this is day 1, and what we're going to do now is I'm just going to put this on the counter over here in the back and leave this for 24 hours, and I'll come back and see you at day 2, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Stick with me. I am back, and it's day 2, and we're going to go to our second feeding now, and I wanted to show you what mine looks like. You can see there I've got quite a bit of bubbles down in there, so we've got a lot of activity. You can see how much is grown here on the side, so this is looking very promising. And it does have a little bit of a different smell to it today than it did yesterday. So that is a good sign. So now we're going to take our scale, and you can do one of two things. We want to leave 70 grams of our starter in here. So if you want to take the measurement of your dish that you had and add the 70 to it, you can come up with that. Or you could take it all out and then put back in 70. Whichever way you want to do it is fine, just as long as you leave 70 grams of your starter in there, and I'm going to do that now. All right, I've got my 70 grams of my starter that I've got left here. This is what I took out. This, you dispose of this. You don't use this, throw this away. So now we're going to go with our flour, and we're going to use one more day of our whole wheat, and we're going to put in another 100 grams of our flour. All right, so now that we've got 100 grams of our flour, carry this back to 0. And now of our water, I'm going to put in 110 grams of my water. All right, now I've got 110 grams of my water in, and I'm just going to take this now and we're going to give this a good mix through with our spatula here. We want to mix in all of that starter from day 1 in with our flour. We don't want any of that dry left behind, so let's give that a good mix through. Now I'm going to put this in a place to keep this for another 24 hours, and I'm going to put mine in my microwave. My home has gotten a little bit cooler, and so with that I'm going to put it in there to get it out of the draft of the room, and it's just a little bit warmer in the microwave. If you decide you want to put it in the oven, just remember, if you put it in the oven, remember to look in there before you turn it on, because I've heard of people that have turned their ovens on and cooked their starter, so that is not where you want to be with that. So I'm going to put mine in microwave and just let it sit in there, and that way it stays a little bit warmer, and I will see you back tomorrow in 24 hours. I am back, and it's day 3 now, and I wanted to show you what my starter looks like. You can see here where I marked it yesterday. Looks like it's gone up about an inch on that, so we're getting ready to do day 3, and day 3 is really smelling like I've got some really good fermentation going on in my starter. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the same as day 2. So we're going to take our starter, and I'm going to take it all out, and I'm going to put back 70 grams, and we're going to discard and throw away the rest of it. All right, now I've got my 70 grams of my starter in my mix here, so I'm now going to put in 100 grams of my flour. All right, now I've got my 100 grams of my flour in, and I'm going to reset that back, and I'm going to put 110 grams of water in. All right, now that I've got my 110 grams of my water in, I'm going to take my spatula and I'm going to give that a good mix through and get all of that new flour incorporated into that old starter. All right, I'm back to where we started yesterday, so I'm going to put this lid back on this, and remember, do not tighten whatever you've got on it down. I'm going to set this back in my warm spot in my microwave out of the draft, and I'll see you on day 4. I am back. It is day 4 now, and I've got some really good growth on my starter here, and I wanted to show you what that looked like. It's come up again about another inch, so that's what we looked at yesterday. We can see some bubbles on the top, and we've got a lot of activity here on the sides of our growth on that now. So that is beginning to smell just like where it's coming right along where it needs to be. So this is day 4. If yours doesn't look like this, then continue on and keep adding another round. And I'm going to show you what we're going to do today. At round 4, we're going to feed. So like yesterday, we're going to take out everything and we're going to leave 70 grams behind. So I'm going to do that now and put 70 grams of my starter back into my jar. All right, now that we got that zero back out, today we're going to put in half of our whole wheat that we've been using, and then I'm going to introduce half of unbleached all-purpose. And make sure it is unbleached, because bleached flour will not work in this. It has to be unbleached. So I'm going to put in 50 grams of my whole wheat and 50 grams of my unbleached all-purpose flour. And I've got everything zeroed back, so I'm going to go ahead and add that now. All right, now that I've got my 50 grams of my whole wheat in, I've zeroed my scale back, and I'm going to put 50 grams of my all-purpose flour. Now that we've got our 50 grams of our all-purpose in, we're going to put in 115 grams of our water. So we'll zero our scale back and add the water. All right, now that we've got our water put in, I'm going to put my cap back on that, set that to the side. We'll get our spatula back out, and we're going to give that all a good mix through now. All right, my mark should be where it was from yesterday, so now we'll put the lid back onto this. I'm going to put this back in my warm place, which has been my microwave, and I'll see you for day 5. I am back. It's day 5. Let's look at our sourdough starter and see where we're at. We've got some really good bubbles in that. I want you to take a look at that, what that has done overnight. And looking at the markings on the side, it didn't quite go up as much as it did the day before. That's because we added that unbleached regular all-purpose flour in there. So it's only gone up about 1/2 inch, and that was to be expected. So now we're going to do the same thing that we did yesterday. We're going to leave 70 grams of our starter in our jar, and we're going to discard the rest of it. I've got 70 grams of my starter back in my jar, and we're going to zero that out. Then I'm going to take 50 grams of my whole wheat flour, and we're going to put that in. And I've got 50 grams of my unbleached all-purpose flour, and we're going to put that in. And then I've got 115 grams of my water, and we're going to add that in. I'm going to take the spatula, and we're going to give that a good stir around to incorporate that into our mixture from our sourdough starter that we had from yesterday. Get all of that flour combined in there. Make sure there's none on the sides that you can see. You can see down in the jar that you're working in, or whatever the vessel that you're working in. Just make sure it gets all mixed together. All right, I'm going to push everything down on the sides so that I can see where everything is. And I wanted to show you back, we're back in that same marking we were at yesterday on the side of that jar. We're going to put the lid back on it, and I'm going to put that back in that nice warm spot where it was at, back in my microwave. And this will be day 5, and we'll see you back on day 6. I am back. It is day 6, and we've got good progress on our sourdough starter. We can see I've got about 1 inch here. We've had some movement on it, and it has come down again. So let's give it a smell. Definitely has that yeasty smell to it. That's what we want. We're going to take out everything out of here except for 70. We're going to leave 70 in here. We're going to discard the rest of it. We're not going to keep it. All right, I've got my 70 grams of my starter back into my jar now, and I've got the sides of it kind of cleaned down. That's just only for me so that I can see and show you where we've got some movement on it now. So we're going to put that back here on the front so you can see that. And I've got my 50 grams of my unbleached all-purpose flour. We'll add that in. I've got my 50 grams of my whole wheat flour. We'll add that in. And the change today is I've got my 100 grams of my water, and we'll add that in. All right, I've got everything mixed together. We want to make sure that we get everything mixed together on the sides of it. Don't leave any of that flour in there that's not mixed together. and we're going to put this lid back on this. I'm going to put this back in my microwave, and we're coming to the end of this, so stick with me and we'll come back for day 7. I am back. It's day 7, and I wanted to show you where my starter is. We've had some good rise and fall on this today. It has come up almost an inch and come down, so that is good. Here's my mark here. So it rose quite a bit, almost 2 inches from last night. So I know I've got a good healthy starter here. I'm gonna go one more day on it just to make sure. That smells really good. And so if yours isn't at this point yet, just keep going a little bit longer with it, and keep feeding it, and we'll feed it the same as what we're feeding it today. But mine, I'm gonna give it one more day at the feeding that we did yesterday, and I'm gonna take out everything and leave 70 grams of my starter in the jar. All right, I got 70 grams of my starter in my jar, and I'm gonna go in with my unbleached all-purpose flour. I got 50 grams of that, 50 grams of my whole wheat flour, and I've got 100 grams of my water. We'll use that spatula and we'll give this a good stir around. All right, I've got everything all mixed together now. We'll put the lid back on it again. I'm gonna put it back in my nice warm place, and that'll be back in my microwave, and I'll see you on day 8. It is day 8, and we're now wanting to check on our sourdough starter. So I've got some really good activity on that. You can see the bubbles on it. We'll look at it from the sides. We've had some good rise and fall on this, so this is good. We've got a lot of good activity on that, and we're going to give it a smell. It smells like sourdough. So now we're going to change for the last 2 feedings on this a little bit every day. So now we're going to take everything out of here except for 50 grams. We're going to leave 50 grams of our starter in our container. So let's take that out, and we'll get 50 grams of our starter. All right, we've got 50 grams of our starter now in our jar, and we're going to go in with our whole wheat flour, and I'm going to add 50 grams of my whole wheat, and I'm going to add 50 grams of my unbleached all-purpose, and this is our 100 grams of water. Add that in, take your spatula, give that a good mix through. Now I'm going to go in and clean my jar top off just to make sure I don't have any of that residue hanging on the top of it there. I've wiped down my side so I can see my rise and my fall. And we're going to take my lid and just put it back on the top. This goes back into your place where you've been keeping it up to this point. And let's see, I can still see my mark here where I've got that, so I know where I'm back where I need to be. I will see you on day 9, and we will give this a test to see if this is ready to be used for some bread. Stick with me, day 9's coming up. I am back, and it's day 9 now, so let's take a look at our sourdough starter we've got here. And take a look at those bubbles on the inside. We've had a lot of rise on that. Looks like we're going to have a nice starter here. So how we want to test this now to see if we are ready to start using this for bread is I have some water here, and I'm just going to take a spoon, and before you deflate it, after it's ridden, you just want to take a spoon and you want to gather you up some of the starter, and you want to take it and you want to put it into your water. Now if the starter floats, you've got a good starter to go, and it is ready to start baking bread. If it sinks, you need to keep feeding it until it floats on the top of the water. So, and if it doesn't, then feed it again. It'll eventually get there. Just keep feeding it, and then you will have your starter ready to go. All right, so now that we know we've got a good starter here, we've got it floating on our water, and I'm going to now show you what we're going to do to feed it today, and then I'm going to talk about how we're going to keep it long term. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and we're going to dispose of everything in here except for 25 grams. You want to keep 25 grams, and we're going to put it back in. Either you can put it into a clean container, and that's what you'll keep it in, or you can put it back in. I'm going to put it back in here today just for demonstration purposes, but you want 25 grams of your starter back into the container. All right, now that I've got my 25 grams of my starter in there, I'm going to take 25 grams of my unbleached flour, and we're going to put that in. And I've got 25 grams of my whole wheat flour. I'll put that in. And now with our water, I've got 50 grams of my water, and we're going to put that in. I'm going to grab my spatula, and I'm going to give that a good stir around. Now that I've got my starter, all of my ingredients mixed together now, from that point forward, that will be your feeding. So we'll put our lid back on it. And if you're not going to use it now, we're going to put it in the refrigerator. And what that's going to do is it's going to slow down the flour and the water and that fermentation process in there, and it's going to slow that down. So when you put it in the refrigerator, it's not going to be eating as much as it normally does if it's sitting out at room temperature. So that's what we want to do. If you're going to put this in the refrigerator, you can store it up to 7 days and then break it back out again, give it another feed, put it back in the refrigerator, and you can feed it once a week just like that. If you're going to know that you're going to be making bread in the next 2 to 3 days, then just take it, feed it, put it back where you've been keeping it, and then do the same thing again on the next day and the next day until you get ready to make bread. Because there is a process that we'll go through when I show you how to make bread of what you're going to have to do to the starter when you pull it out of the refrigerator to get it reactivated back to room temperature again. So this is what we're going to do when we're going to put it in the refrigerator, and that way you can just keep it long term. And there is no, I've heard of people that have kept it for, decades, and it's been passed on from different families and things. So we're going to feed it, put it in the refrigerator, and then if you've got a timer on your watch or timer on your phone, set it for a week, just a reminder that you've got that in there and it needs to be fed, and that'll just kind of be an audible alarm for that. Or if you don't have that, you can put a piece of tape on it showing when it needs to be fed, and that way when you open the door you go, oh, there's my starter, I need to feed it today. So you've got a couple options for that. So I hope you like this content, and if you do, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And check out one of these other 2 videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment. I want to hear how your starter turned out and what you're using it for. I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.